Everyone, this is my report about the case assessment on direct and indirect threats to coral reefs. First is research and case selection. Direct threats. One of the most significant threats to reefs is pollution. Land-based runoff and pollutant discharges can result from dredging, coastal development, agricultural and deforestation activities, and sewage treatment plant operations. This runoff may contain sediments, nutrients, chemicals, insecticide, oil, and debris. When some pollutants enter the water, nutrient levels can increase, promoting the rapid growth of algae and other organisms that can smother corals. Coral reefs also affected by leaking fuels, anti-fouling paints and coatings, and other chemicals that enter the waters. Petroleum spills do not always appear to affect corals directly because the oil usually stays near the surface of the water, and much of it evaporates into atmosphere within days. However, if an oil spill occurs while corals are spawning, the eggs and the sperm can be damaged as they float near the surface before they fertilize and settle. So, in addition to compromising water quality, oil pollution can disrupt the reproductive success of corals, making them vulnerable to other types of disturbances. Next is the indirect threats. The most significant and immediate danger to coral reefs is the climate change, a direct consequence of rising ocean temperature caused by climate change. Similar to humans having a temperature limit, coral experience stress when water temperature increase. This stress causes them to expel zooxanthellae, the colorful algae live in their tissues that provide essential nourishment through photosynthesis. The loss of their algae leaves them was, as you can see, through their white skeleton, hence the term bleaching. It leaves them weakened and vulnerable to disease and starvation. Although corals can potentially recover, the stress subsides. Prolonged bleaching events frequently lead to widespread coral mortality. Second is the case summary. First is write a brief summary for each case describing first the nature of the threat and the indirect threats. Second is how the threats affect coral reefs health and ecosystem services. Climate change indirectly threatens coral reefs by causing bleaching, ocean acidification, stronger storms, and sea level rise. These stresses weaken coral health, reduce reef growth, and make reefs more vulnerable to disease. As reefs decline, ecosystem services such as coastal protection, fisheries, tourism, and biodiversity support are diminished. The third is the human activities causing the threats. Burning of fossil fuels, oil gas, releasing greenhouse gases, deforestation, reduces carbon absorption, increasing carbon oxygen, industrial processes and agricultural, transportation. These activities increase global warming and ocean acidification which indirectly harm coral reefs. Number 4, any ecological or socioeconomic consequences observed. Ecological consequences. First is coral bleaching and mortality, reduced reef growth and structural weakening, loss of biodiversity, and disrupted food webs and ecosystem balance. Third is the impact analysis. Assess the severity of threat on the coral reef's biodiversity and on human community relying on reef services. Direct threat, pollution, nutrients, plastics, sediments, and chemicals. Biodiversity impact, moderate to severe. Nutrient runoff, fuels, algal blooms, blocking sunlight and depleting oxygen. Sediment, smother corals and reduce recruitment. Plastic and toxins, physically damage or poison reefs organism. Human community impact, moderate. Reduce reef health, lower fisheries productivity, and aesthetic value for tourism. Water pollution may also pose health risks to people. Next is assess the severity of each threat on the coral reefs, biodiversity, and human communities relying on reef services. Indirect threats, biodiversity impact about climate change. Rising sea temperature trigger coral bleaching, weakening self-reliance, while acidification and reduces coral calcification, leading to reef collapse and loss of species dependent on reef habitats. The human community impact very severe. Declines in reef, the fish stocks reduce to food supply and degrades reefs provide less coastal protection from storms and erosion. Tourism, which depends on healthy reefs, also suffers. Next is discuss whether the threat is localized or widespread, acute or chronic. Indirect threats to coral reefs. Climate change. Scale widespread affects reefs globally from the Great Barrier Reef to the Coral Triangle. To the nature, chronic with acute episodes. Long-term ocean warming and acidification, but bleaching events occur suddenly during heat waves. Direct threats, second is pollution. Scale localized to regional. Heaviest near densely populated coasts, rivers, or industrial zones. Nature, chronic, continuous input of nutrients, sediments, and chemicals weakens reef over decades. Impact, severity, severe. Nature, acute, but if repeated can become chronic cycle of corals. Therefore, is proposed solution. Suggest realistic and effective measures to mitigate or manage its threat. First is the climate change. Cut greenhouse gas emission. Second, strengthen global climate change. Protect climate's refugia. Support coral restoration with its tolerant coral species. Next is the direct threats. Pollution. Upgrade sewage and wastewater treatment facilities. Reduce agricultural runoff. Improve solid waste management. Enforce strict regulation of industrial charges. And restore mangroves, wetlands, and seagrass as natural filters. Community-based approach, establishing marine protected areas, promoting sustainable fishing practices, community-led reef monitoring and restoration, awareness campaigns on responsible tourism and waste management, policy-level approach, enforcing fishing bans, restriction, and critical reef areas. Direct threats, climate change, coral bleaching from warming seas, ocean acidification, and seagrass replanting projects, coral-friendly livelihood shapes, level approaches, national and international climate commitments, large-scale habitat protection law, research and funding and support for climate adaptation strategies, and collaboration in regional and global marine governance. The last and final presentation and reflection. Create a recorded video and submit a written report presenting on these activities about direct and indirect threats. Addressing both direct and indirect threats to corals is critical because coral reefs are not only vibrant ecosystem but also life support system for millions of people. Food, coastal protection, income from tourism, and severe as nurseries for countless marine species. Threats like pollution and indirect threats, climate change, destructive tourism cause immediate and visible damage, while indirect such as climate change and ocean acidification create long-term stress that weakens coral reefs' resilience. And equally important is the balance between community-based and policy-level approaches. Community efforts foster stewardship and accountability, while strong policies provide the legal framework and resources to scale up conservation. Together, these strategies can build resilience in coral ecosystems, safeguard biodiversity, and sustain human livelihoods that depends on the healthy reefs. And that's only for my report. And thank you.